Awesome. We're now recording. Hey, everyone. Welcome to the interim CALEXT and CalConnect meeting. I'm just going to share the slides now and let's get started. That's gone black again, hasn't it?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that is pathetic. I've shifted from my big screen so that I could have this little thing here and it's just gone black again. All right, you'll have to open the slides yourself and I'll tell you what page we're on.
So difficult.
I know, technology, how does it even work? All right, slides link
I put them over there.
is there.
Okay.
Well, that gives us more space to see each other's faces, I guess, as we chat. In terms of running this meeting, I don't expect that we're going to have to do an official queue as such. I think just talk, and if we discover that it's getting too difficult to manage, then we'll do a speaker queue, but otherwise we're a small enough group that it should just be fine to chat amongst ourselves. Heading over to page 2 on the slides, it's just details of how to participate. We're all here, so clearly everyone's worked that out. Page 3 on the slides is the note well. This is an IETF meeting, so we are operating under the note well. All the standard IPR, etc. rules apply. This is public, it is being recorded, notes will be published, etc. So don't say anything you don't want the world to know. Slide 4 is the agenda. Start with a brief agenda bash and just a little, I think we need to work out how we're going to get our work done over the rest of this year, given that we don't have the meetings as a forcing function to make us actually get things done. Just flagging that now, we'll probably talk about it at the end as well when we go through the milestones, how we're going to make sure the work progresses with the group that we have. I've also put a link in slide 4 to the minutes of the previous meeting that we had at IETF 106 in Singapore. Throughout these slides, I've put notes of the action points that we decided for the various documents there to remind us what we're supposed to have done by now, and hopefully get the discussion started. Is there any other agenda bash, anything people want to add to our agenda?
Hi, this is Henk.
Hi, Henk.
Fraunhofer Institute, Germany, and co-author of CDDL. So I'm here basically for the JS calendar thingy, the JS card stuff. So, but unfortunately, I am only available until the next top of the hour. So I assume this fits nicely. But if it does not, could you squeeze the JS calendar stuff in before the top of the hour?
Yeah, it should be in this hour for sure.
Okay.
You can shift the series down, I mean, so we can take that
Yeah,
later.
all right, so we'll do event pub first and then straight to JS calendar.
Thanks.
I noticed that I'm still the only person whose name's in the Etherpad, so
Oh no.
please do go on and put your names in.
It's
not what I saw.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's at least 5 of us in there now.
Wow. Then it's not updating for me. Yay, technology. All our tools.
And actually, I don't see your name in there, Bron. So maybe we're on a different
Are you on a
Etherpad.
different
You have a different
Etherpad?
Etherpad? We're using the one that you like posted the link to in
Yeah,
Zoom.
I see notes about myself, and this is Hank and the Ethernet, but the blue sheet only has one name. So that's probably different, you're right.
Yeah,
So,
no, I've got the same as Bron. I just added my name.
Right,
Oh, sorry.
we've got 2
oh,
different.
yeah, no, okay. Sorry, this is the one that I sent out with the link. Daniel, did you create a different Etherpad?
I created a different one.
I think so. You've got notes IETF interim. Oh, that's the official one, and I've created one.
Oh yeah, okay.
All right. Apologies. That must be the official one, and I created one separately. So I messed this up. All right, put them wherever you want, and let's do the official one because that will be the one that they archive for it.
Where's the official one?
Can we say you are here or?
Why don't I put the link to the official one at the top of the other one? We're doing well. There you go.
Okay, here we go. All right. Oh, what
I
happened?
just pasted a whole heap of stuff at the top.
Oh, okay. All right, I'm in.
And then I'll cut the bottom off
Oh.
there. I'm just transferring everything across from the other document. There we go. Awesome. Now we're all on the same page, as they say.
That's interesting. Okay.
And the page we're on is page number 5 of the slides, which is Event Pub. So the action was that Mike to update draft have an initial data copied into the event and URIs to be a way to get updated data. This was from the privacy evaluation.
Yeah, yeah, I gotta say I didn't get that done. I ran into some difficulties when I was just thinking about it. And it's sort of, I mean, yes. That was the main outstanding thing. I realized I hadn't done that. Now I'm thinking about it. I guess it needs a different yeah, yeah. It turns out, yes. I think I looked at this and decided I just got bogged down with it. It sort of means having two things, doesn't it? You've got to have the value and a URI, which is not the way things have been typically. And it is that, I mean, every time we got a URI, we're going to do that. It just doesn't seem altogether right to me in the end.
Yeah. I guess we should discuss that again here. There's two things, right? There's consensus amongst this group, and then there is convincing.
This kind of thing has always come up in the past, and the general agreement that I recollect with people, and not just the IETF, you know, in various places, is that, well, you've got a URI and you don't want to be hanging around downloading this thing. There's always the possibility of caching it. So at least we can deal with the offline mode in that way.
Yeah.
There is the issue of whether you want to download it at all anyway.
Yeah, of course.
And that's just a general issue. Should you just go and download a URI? It doesn't matter whether you're going to download it to make it work for offline work, or whether you're going to download it so people can look at it. The answer is probably you ought to be asking them whether they want to download this thing. But then I get to think, well, what's the difference between that and, say, a web page that's full of links and things that you don't ask people generally? I mean, there's some places say, oh yeah, you're going to go to another site if you click on this, but that's the exception rather than the rule. You click on stuff and it might take you to another site. I sort of struggled with the difference between the security implications for this and the security implications for almost anything we do these days.
This was URIs for stuff that was embedded in, potentially for auto displaying images, that kind of thing, I suspect.
There's images, and you know, things sort of deal with that in the current sort of mail client world. Is, you know, do you want to view the HTML, or do you want to just have some sort of raw text representation of it? And then you say, yeah, I want to see the site, and it displays the full content. And it's sort of a generic answer to the problem of how you deal with URLs,
Hmm.
rather than trying to deal with it on almost on a per property basis.
Yeah, sadly we don't have Barry here because he was the one who's got the.
Well, it is a concern, but it's. I mean, and I was going back to think about, well, how do we deal with, say, you know, as a result of looking at the JS calendar stuff, and how do you deal with contact? And in 5545, the contact is just a text field. Where if you've actually got a real card of some kind, that's obviously a better thing to be referring to, because it's more likely to be up to date if changes have got made, like the phone number or whatever. The fallback is to just in JS calendars just turn into a data URI and shove it in there, which I don't know is necessarily any better. You may just be hiding the offensive content inside a data URI.
Yeah, often with things like contacts, that it's messy. You kind of want to know what the value was at the time, as well as being able to get the updated one. Because if the contact's missing, then you don't have the information anymore about what was there. And certainly for archival purposes, you need to know what it was at a point in time. But for publishing for an event which is now, maybe you don't care about all that stuff.
Yeah, and I guess the contact thing had made me sort of rethink it. I mean, maybe the best approach is to have a the names keep getting used up. I was thinking of having a source URI, but then the name is used in other places for something slightly different. But maybe have something which always indicates the source of what you got, and then have the thing itself encoded in some form, but it's probably going to be a data URI, because the form, it'll be the same format, which I don't see as is hugely different from caching. But it's, you know, if you want it embedded in the contact, we either end up building ourselves complex properties that don't quite match the thing we're pointing at, or we say, well, this is a V card. Either it's on the end of a URI, or here's a data URI with a V card encoded in it.
I presume the original security concern was to do with like leaking IP addresses and that kind of thing when you connect. Is that right? I'm trying to remember.
Yeah, that's my recollection as well. I'm just going to pull up the.
I think there was a very generalized comment about following URIs.
I mean, again, it depends on the context accessing it. You know, at Fastmail, we proxy everything that's connecting to an external server, so that whoever it is only knows that someone from Fastmail connected. They don't know which user, they don't know where the user is, or anything like that. But
yeah,
that's dependent on the service to be able to provide that. It's not inherent.
Yeah, and my response to the thing, I think we never really, I think we sort of came to some agreement on that, was that this is such a general problem in the stuff we deal with. I mean, it turns up, URIs turn up everywhere, and the issue of handling things like this really belongs in almost a separate, RFC, informational or otherwise, that tells you exactly how you should handle this kind of stuff, or at least gives you a lot of ideas such as that. Some of the issues of having these things, as you say, is maybe something could be tracking you by having the thing just downloading stuff.
Yeah, all the notes back in the minutes were from the last meeting, pretty much covered all of this.
I don't think we didn't actually get to put together any form of meeting or thing to cover this. And my point at that stage was is it just seemed, I'm not saying that this particular draft was being picked on, but how many drafts have we had and specs have we had that have exactly this in them? They have a URI of some kind pointing at something. And yeah, Event Pub happened to be the one that popped up that where somebody thought about it, but I'm not sure it's the best place to actually resolve the issue.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Unfortunately, Barry's got the deciding vote on whether it goes ahead or not with this. So we need to convince him.
Well,
what I suspect is that we probably have to talk to him unless we reach an agreement. Because I agree with what you're saying, Mike. I guess the context was all the phishing, and so I don't know if they want to use the calendar entry to have people clicking on the website, or because if you don't download it, then it means you're clearly tracking the person. So I think it's as you mentioned, it's something that has been probably picked up, and we don't want to have the general debate into that document. So we should try to see what makes the AD happy on that for that draft, and eventually commit in handling this more general thing in another document. But I think it's going to be hard to find a solution we're sure of for that given draft. So
yeah, I mean, if we, I mean, I'd happily get on another call specifically for this issue.
Can we maybe suggest that URLs shouldn't be automatically downloaded unless you have a setting in the app or something?
Yeah, and that the default should be off.
Yeah, because this sort of mimics what email clients do these days.
Yeah, I think
said, yeah.
Yeah, that would be fine. At least
and some generic text, you know, that otherwise this is very similar to web pages. Actually, I think it will probably help people.
Yeah.
At least to sort of have a mental model of how they think about this. Or to emphasize, this is not particularly different. And I think also talking about phishing and tracking, if the URLs is being automatically dereferenced, that's also probably a good text to add.
Okay, I'll take a look at it. I'll add something of that kind. I can always put a pointer in each of the things where there is a URL and say, you know, see the security section, and then put something bigger in that.
Yeah, yeah.
But
yeah.
Okay, I'll do that and see how that works. And then I'll ping
because yeah,
again.
if you suggest some text, at least we can wordsmith it as opposed to you know, keep having this discussion in abstract. That might be easier.
Yeah, and if we had a separate document that covered these things, if it was information, something we could update, I guess at least we could, when these things popped up, we have something to point people at. Say, refer to this.
Sure.
Okay. All right. I'll deal with that. I think that's the only thing that's really outstanding on the event pub thing, except that I've started to get bothered about it in relation to JS Calendar. So
yeah, we'll talk about that in the JS Calendar section, I guess.
Yep.
Unless there's something you think needs to be changed in event pub to be
well, then
JS Calendar.
There may be as I've been looking at the mapping issues. So that I think we can deal with the mapping issues and see how that affects event pub, if at all.
All right. Next, let's talk about JS Calendar. So that we're skipping ahead a slide now. Back on the slides, we're going all the way down to slide 7. So who wants to talk about this?
Well, I guess since I suddenly became active on this, I'd better say where I got and why and how. So when I've been sort of engaged on other things. Then I started on building myself a library to do sort of the equivalent to iCal for J, but you know, the JS calendar, but not quite like but anyway, sort of a library. And I built all that part with the intention of moving on to getting a JMap implementation going. So the first thing I was going to try and do is actually get this stuff coming out through feeds and CalDAV paths, and with the intent of trying to get some exposure for it. Because I think it'll be a really good thing for the people who take feeds out of our system. And but the next step I realized was really I had to convert this stuff from my internal representation, which sort of follows the iCalendar model, but isn't, and convert that into JS Calendar. And the first two properties I came across just immediately posed difficulties, and it's been the case ever since. Every property I've looked at, it's raised questions. And if it's raising questions for me, it's going to raise questions for anybody. And that's when I came, you know, after I started early on, I realized we have to have a very explicit mapping with lots of musts, and as to how you get from iCalendar to JS Calendar and back again. Because if we want, you know, if we want people to migrate to using JS Calendar, iCalendar is not going away. You know, 10 years down the road, we'll still be doing iCalendar. And people have got iCalendar embedded deeply in their system. Many people, it's the data model they use internally. It's just not going to go away. It's a primary part of what we do. So somebody's going to convert this stuff, send you JCalendar or iCalendar, JS Calendar or iCalendar, and you're going to have to convert it back. So you're going to have to know exactly how they did it, or at least exactly how they should have done it. So that was the motivation behind this thing, that we can't be just saying implementation dependent anywhere. And it does affect the JS Calendar draft in a number of ways. They're not major changes, I think, but they're changes all the same. You know, the issues that I'm coming across are, you know, when we talk about, I probably need to look at some of my own notes if I can find them, are things like, where do you put the location property for one, for example, and how do you identify, if you've got more than one location, how do you identify the one that is the location property from the iCalendar object? We can't have it converted one way and then come back again looking different. That's all. And that turns up in a number of places, that there are places where we have, I can't remember what it is, the rel type or whatever. I think that the same issue turns up with contact, with geo. I think contact was another one, wasn't it? That we can't do without a contact. It's absolutely vital. In event publication, everybody has a contact. And yeah, down the road, it'd be great to have multiple contacts, but we can't be, it just has to work so that when you convert backwards and forwards, we know exactly where the contact is. The spec just doesn't allow for that.
Sorry to interrupt you. This I don't understand. Which contact you are talking about?
The contact property in iCalendar. There has to be a one-to-one conversion, backwards and forwards. You have to be able to identify exactly where it went and how to get it back. And it's true of a lot of things. How do we deal with it? I mean, not that many people use the geo, but just because not many people use it, when you scale it up, it's still a lot of people.
Yeah, so for geo,
go on, yeah.
Yeah, just as an example for this, I agree with very most what you're saying. For geo, as we already discussed, you can describe it in a location as it is defined in JS Calendar, but it's again a good example of those where iCalendar only allows one of these properties to be set, whereas JS Calendar allows multiple instances of this set. And this is indeed an issue that we encounter at various places in the mapping so far.
Yeah, I'm not asking for a you know, or suggesting that we can manage a perfect mapping.
No,
But
that's not what I'm saying, but I agree with you that at least at the moment, for example, in the Cyrus IMAP implementation, we are using heuristics to identify which of these JS Calendar locations, for example, is the one that most properly fits into the iCalendar location, and which locations are these that we put into an X location property or what else. Yeah? And this is indeed showing up at different places in the mapping. So at least there should be a good or a hard rule, which of a set of candidates for the respective iCalendar property should be the one elected, so to say. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's, you know, it's sort of different when you're just generating iCalendar out of your, if you're starting off with a JS Calendar model and you need to export this, but when it comes back at you after having perhaps been modified, being converted back to JS Calendar, modified, and maybe somebody added another location and then sends it all the way back to you again, how do you know which one was the geo to start with? The way you do it is there has to be something in that location that flags it as being the geo property initially. I mean, if there is none and you've got a bunch of locations, then that's fine. That's probably something that never set the geo property in the first place. But we just need a flag that says this is the geo property. And when you convert from iCalendar with a geo property set into, and you build a bunch of locations. I mean, technically it's easy. We're not talking about something that's difficult, but we just have to know. And that kind of issue turns up all over the place. You know, contact. I mean, contacts are not even allowed for in the current spec. They have to be a participant. But how do we know which participant is? That's where the tie back to event pub turns up. Initially was how do we represent the contact? Well, we represent the contact as a participant, and then we start having to introduce a few of the participant properties that weren't in there, like the participant type. So that's why I say there's a two-way thing going on here. Is that when I started looking at it, well, it looked like I can't remember what the changes. I realized I need to make a change to event pub to make this work, but I think we need to use the participant type, which doesn't exist in JS Calendar. The assumption is they're all attendees.
Yeah, so as I said, I'm very much in favor of defining a clear set of rules as in a mapping RFC for mapping between iCalendar and JS Calendar. As we also already discussed, I wouldn't want to have that be part of the JS Calendar spec. It should be a separate standard. I think we agree to that, or if not, please let me know. But thirdly, I would very much not like to bake into the JS Calendar format translation guidelines with iCalendar. It seems, I mean, I know the real world pragmatic thing why we would some guidelines here or some tools, but in the other hand, I really wouldn't want to mix these formats so closely because basically it would mean that JS Calendar, there should be really two different data formats and not necessarily. Yeah. Please. go
I
ahead.
agree with your point. We have to be able to move on, but we also have to be able to coexist for the next few
Yes,
years.
so-
You know, it's a decade or so. We're going to have to coexist, and anything that is done in iCalendar from now on has to it flips it around. It has to be compatible with what we're doing in JS Calendar, but we have to be at a point now where we can do a reversible mapping as near as possible between the two. So if you start off with iCalendar, you can turn a JS Calendar, you can send that to somebody else, they can turn it back into iCalendar and get pretty close to what you actually started with. And it's not a matter of guesswork or heuristics or anything else. It's got to be in the data. And that probably means, in fact, absolutely means changes to the current JS Calendar spec to reserve certain rel types, to add some flags, to add types to the participant, and so on and so forth. Then I don't think any of them are huge changes, but I don't think we can just push the mapping off to one side and say, oh, we'll do that later. It's part of what we have to do. Otherwise, we're going to end up like we started off in CalConnect over a decade ago. The whole reason for having CalConnect was the terrible interoperability problems we had. You simply couldn't send an event to somebody and have them understand what it meant. There were problems all over the place. We don't want to do that again. And that's the danger of not specifying this properly from the outset.
I think reserving specific keys sounds totally reasonable. Did you get to a list of what you think needs to be done?
I've started building a list, and the problem is that every time I start thinking, oh, this is going to be an easy one, I realized I'd missed attach, and I went back and did that a couple of days ago, and suddenly, well, that's really hard. There's another issue, is that we've buried all. We've buried everything inside link. And I just spent an entire day trying to implement, how would I deal with somebody who has an override where they've just removed an attachment? And now I've got to disentangle, let's say we've got a bunch of images and attachments and all these other links and things. Now I've got to disentangle these things from that collection and build an override which looks right for what we're doing. And these are unrelated properties that we've buried inside link. There's images, there's whatever it is, and maybe we'll have to put some other stuff in there. So there are some issues over that. I think that we'd be a lot better off having an attachments property, even in JS Calendar. It's a different usage. And then when you get a bit once I started dealing with the overrides, the complexities of processing, it's difficult. I mean, it's not sort of difficult. It's just you could spend an entire day implementing just how do you do an override. It certainly defeats the idea of it being something simple to use.
I can't follow the specific example. So why would it make it more simple if there would be an attachments property in addition to a links property or whatever
with links inside it, simply because their usage is different. I mean, the likelihood is that if you've got, say, a meeting or whatever, or an event going on over time, and you've got different, the chances are you might have a different agenda every meeting. The thing, they look pretty much the same from meeting to meeting, but you change the agenda. You've got half a dozen.
I think Robert's point there is, why is it
harder?
More difficult to, yes, if it's in a links property versus in an attachments property that seems basically the same code-wise to me.
It's not code-wise, because you've got to separate out the attachments from the links. You've got to rebuild a whole collection of stuff that's being used for different purposes. I mean, it's how to identify all these changes for an override. It's just more complex. An override is going to have the whole links property repeated just because you changed one attachment.
No, you do a patch.
No, yeah, you patch the link thing, exactly.
And how do you patch a link? single.
You would,
The way-
in this example, you would have links slash the link ID that you do not want to
Okay,
be
yeah, it's true,
included,
yes, you would.
and you would write a null. So it would be one line in that case. Of course, if you delete multiple links in an override, there will be some tipping point where it will be more compact to define the complete list of the updated links. But basically, you can use either approach.
Yeah.
So two things. We had a companion document with the JS calendar specification, and so I guess this document expired, but wasn't it the purpose of clarifying the conversion between iCal and JS calendar?
You got
Yes.
Yes, that's true.
So I think we're all in agreement that that document's important, and possibly even we make that standards track rather than informational as we were originally planning. I think the disagreement is on whether or how much changes would still be required to JS calendar, and whether to hold up the JS calendar spec waiting on that, or can we push ahead with this still?
Well, here's the. I absolutely believe we've got to update JS calendar to some extent for this to make this work, and I don't think we can avoid that. In my own mind, I just don't think it matters too much one way or the other whether the thing is one document or two. People, there's enough people complain that they don't like following multiple documents. They'd like it in one, but then there's people the other way around. But it's fine. I don't think that that's a big deal. But I think the two are inextricably linked. That's the problem. We've got decades of years of having to deal with this stuff. The likelihood is that almost anybody who wants to implement JS calendar is going to have to do that mapping. There'll be a few people who have the luxury of being able to look at just JS calendar. There'll be the people who maybe have a web page that they're trying to display this stuff on. That's it. Everyone else is going to have to be doing the mapping. And apart from that, if we're reserving stuff in JS calendar for the mapping, it's a little hard not. My only concern about, as I said, about not having it as a embedded in the document is it makes it easier for people to ignore it and then just do their own mapping that doesn't work. But that's my feeling on it. I'm prepared to, I'm not going to insist it be one document. I think it'd be better as one document. That's my opinion. But I don't think we can until we have substantially completed the mapping, I don't think we can say JS calendar is done. That's my feeling. And I don't think we're talking about years. It depends how fast people respond to any of the questions I put on the list. I haven't had a single response yet. So you need to get on there and start responding to some of these things. I mean, yeah, I could be wrong on some of the issues, but I know I'm right on some of them. So we need to resolve it. And I can do this. I'm trying to work through this thing to some extent in a piecemeal basis. And I started trying to implement the stuff one at a time, and then thought this is going to be too slow. At least we're going to make a good pass through every property. And what I've been finding is the way to really figure out where the issues are is at least take 5545 and work through every damn property in there and try converting the examples. Because I keep running into problems as I do that. And I don't believe all my problems are illusory or anything else. I think they're real.
But there are two things. One which is related to the model. So for example, something is missing. And I'm not saying properties, but it's really related to the model. And one is how you convert, how you do the matching between those two. And I think, I have the impression that we stated that we're going to do two documents. So I'd like us to keep that, to follow on with that decision we made. and to keep, I mean, the updates for the, I mean, we may improve GS calendaring, but I'd like then the updates should be mostly related to the model. For example, we're missing something or in that model, but so maybe the conversion can help into that. But I would like to keep those translation and the model as two separate documents.
I'm fine with that. So, I mean, I'm not going to push that. But I think, yeah, there are I think your substantially JS calendar is going to work. If there is missing stuff, like say a participant type, and then there's things like reserving values for the mapping, which I think has to be in the JS calendar spec. Yeah, but substantially, I think that's fine. I can live with that.
And the other way around is, if Alex is here, we can have a version 1 for GS calendar and improve that version. I don't know how feasible it is, but it's also, we may agree we do something that we believe is stable and candidate for a grade later. That's I don't know how it could work. Also,
it's tricky with the IETF model, isn't it? To
but that's it is, and that's why I said we need to have the version number and use it. Because, I mean,
yeah, if we have a GS calendar version 1, and then we do version 1.1 or 2.
Yes, exactly.
I guess
and
it's an hour
don't,
debate. That's it.
Yes, how you increment, but we shouldn't fall into the trap of doing what iCalendar did, of having a version 2 and never changing it. I mean, I realized a week or so ago when I said we should have a version number, we should use it, was we must spend half our time when we try and add another iCalendar property or a change to iCalendar going on about backward compatibility. And it's just ridiculous. We end up like, okay, you're supposed to ignore anything you don't understand. We can leave that in place even in JS calendar. It's fine. But we can't make a slight change to iCalendar because older clients will break or something like that. We'll end up in exactly the same position if we don't start doing versioning. And it's perfectly reasonable. In most other things manage to do that kind of thing.
So Barry's just let me know that he's only got about 10 minutes more. I messaged him to see if he could join because we didn't have
the event. Barry's gone, yes.
So if we could just nip back to that for a little bit and talk briefly through the issue with Event Pub was to do with URLs being, or URIs being automatically loaded, and that the security issues related to that, and whether we needed to wait for a BCP to come out or not. The suggestion that we came to, Barry, before you arrived, was that we could put something in the security section to say clients should not automatically download unless the user has turned on an option which must default to off, and wondered whether that would be sufficient for you.
I think it's probably the best we can do. We absolutely should not wait for a BCP on it. So don't take that off the table. That doesn't make sense. We probably should work on such a document though. But yeah, I guess that suggestion is about the best we could do. I'm a little worried about an option to tell the client to download all URLs or URIs. I would rather have maybe at the should level, that's the best we should do. There might be, you might add a little more text to explain the issue with the security issue with downloading URIs, and recommend at a non-normative level that the user be asked for each URI. The user be warned about each URI, you know, that this could cause unwanted side effects or harm your system.
Or to use some kind of whitelist.
Right. Yes, whitelist would be good. So a little more text than that would be helpful. but yeah, I think that's really all that makes sense to do. The problem I'm looking at is people embedding URIs that distribute malware, people embedding URIs that have one-time use issues where if the client downloads them without explicit action, it could use them up. I'm worried about URIs that cause side effects like one-click purchases or unsubscribes or things like that. Those are the sorts of things that I'm concerned about. So a little bit more text than that, but yeah, that'll do it.
Well, okay. So let me say, so if I come up with some text and I'll circulate on the list, and maybe it can be a little more than just, you know, a brief mention. Perhaps we can put it as a, I don't know, as a subsection somewhere on handling URIs. I think if we can put something in there, I mean, it's perhaps, you know, verifying the URIs to some extent before you download them, if you know where they're coming from, which I guess is what you're saying with whitelisting. And then if we can come up with some agreement, I can just circulate some wording.
I think
and then we can...
a warning of the issues that can arise, a recommendation to have a whitelist and to check with the user on things that are not on the whitelist. Yeah, something that would be. I'm not looking for pages. I'm looking for a couple paragraphs. But yeah, I think that would do it. Please CC me explicitly so I don't miss it when you put it on the list.
Okay, I'll do that.
Thanks. And yeah, sorry that this has dragged on for as long as it has. That we should have resolved this sooner.
That's okay. It was partly me not pushing it as well. So I think it's the last real outstanding issue that we've got. So.
Yep, and thanks for all the work on this. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Cool. All right. Do we have more to do back on JS calendar?
So yeah, hi, this is Hank. Oh, sorry.
Hank.
Go ahead.
Yeah,
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Ah, okay. Yeah, it was procrastinating in case. So I'm here because I basically literally am using CalDev and CalDev Fiber. And I saw the the development of the emerging draft that is JS card or JS contact, I assume it's called, basically the card part of the world. And so as I was always, so a little bit of my background, I'm from CDL, the concise definition, data definition language, and I'm from doing basically these IETF versions of the things that some people call schemas for JSON and the binary equivalent that is a superset, is the CBOR. And I'm a big fan of iCal and iCards. So I'm natively moved here basically because I am interested in this work in general personally. And then I saw, oh, you're doing JSON definition here, and then I was trying to read and understand them. And with everything that's just written in English text, I was like, okay, maybe you would be interested in having this in a formal data definition language type of way that would accommodate both JS-Cal as is JS card. And because I assume that you would have better readability and a well-defined structure that you can validate and create by, so the construction part. The messages that are basically JS card and JS cal. At the moment, you have a very complex and sometimes a little bit ambiguous. So only my 10 my high read them one, created a single CDDL for card, and I tried to make sense of it. So it's a little bit ambiguous wording there. And so my question to this group here, before I write anything just out of the blue to the list, and by the way, hi, Alexei. I would like to ask, are you interested in having accommodating a corresponding appendices with these documents that would provide you with a data definition language definition of the format that is basically JS-Cal and JS-Card?
I guess the short answer for me is yes. But how it's packaged, I guess, is not up to me.
Well, Robert and Neil are the authors on this one.
So in general, in my opinion, on any machine-readable description always is good. But I mean, I don't know if this would need to be put into the spec, or I also haven't made up my mind where this should go. But the effort itself definitely is of value, of course.
I think this gets back to my point I made earlier on. Is it'd be great if the IETF didn't treat these documents as immutable when they really aren't. We could just bring one out down the road and say this is the document, and we could add things like that as an appendix, and people would always get pointed at the latest thing. Maybe we could help with CalConnect and package all this stuff together in a way and point at these things.
There's a huge discussion going on in the IETF about immutability of documents.
They're not immutable. There's errata,
Yeah.
so they're not immutable.
Yes.
Yeah, and two ways to add stuff to things. The data definition could include extension points. For example, I saw that by definition, some of the major items, I think metadata items it was, in the text highlight these maps or these objects, JSON objects are intended to be extensible and have more keys in them later on. And this can be accommodated today via the formal definition. So there can be additional RFCs that just create extensions to this. Or if you have a fundamental change, you can change the basic structure.
The history of JS Calendar is going to be exactly the same as the history of iCalendar in that respect, in that we have been constantly adding stuff. And this is what I referred to earlier with versioning, is that we add properties to iCalendar, or we add parameters to iCalendar properties, or we try and add new value types, which is the worst thing you can possibly do in iCalendar because there's no versioning. And everything we do, we have to worry about breaking the older clients, which will just swallow the stuff and then explode. So we got to assume that JS Calendar will be extended in very many ways as time goes on, and any specification has to allow for that. And that's where versioning would help. If you had a version that you knew explicitly what was allowed in that version by the spec, then you could just parse it with the appropriate version. And anything you didn't understand would just get shuffled off to the side as being stuff you ignore.
Yeah, I'm not sure if you really need versions for that, due to the, if you have fine-grained extensibility and using objects. Objects, I think, are somehow in the lane of you might not need versions here. So you can just omit items you don't know. And the items you know, or basically due to extensions that you know, you can have provide a procedure for. So yes, while I assume versions look like a good idea always, I assume that there will never be a single version being deployed, and therefore it creates a little bit of rift or friction or something like that. So if you have a system in place that takes care of extensibility without versioning properly, just by having modular extensibility features, that might reduce the threshold a little bit.
It's not the extensibility. Adding new stuff has always been relatively easy. You can add a new property, you can add a new component or whatever. Though the component blew up most of the libraries that were around. It's when you make changes to existing properties, and in JS Calendar it changes to existing objects. That if we have something that's incompatible to some extent, or an assumption changes, we realize we've got a problem and need to fix it.
Well, we could have fixed that in our calendar too, just by but say if there was a problem somewhere in attendee, just replacing it with something called participant instead, and you either use participants or you use attendees depending on which version.
Well, I did that, and it's a pretty imperfect way of dealing with it. But yeah, there are ways around it, but you're always working around an issue that would have been much better dealt with by simply saying this is version, you know, X, and this is how you interpret it. I mean, the parsing the thing is one thing. We're not changing the structure, which it doesn't. That's not a problem. You can parse it all out into the appropriate objects and things, but it's how you interpret what you've got is the problem.
The issue is if you have something that knows how to parse version 3.2 and version 3.3 comes along and it changes the semantics, you don't know how much it's changed the semantics until you go into semantic versioning horrors. And so you don't know how much of it you can still understand. Can you understand any of it or none of it until you get upgraded to a version 3.3 parser?
Well,
if you change the meaning of a word or a named type or label or something, if you change the semantic meaning of that, then you really have to be very careful and create new documents. That is for sure.
That's why I don't think we really should have a version. I think that the system that we currently have of letting you define new properties if you really have to is actually a better extension. I don't think
ever discussing these things because we don't have a version.
Can you give me a specific example?
I'll go back through the stuff, but Apple just adding the email parameter to attendees caused enough problems.
Yeah, the main problem with iCalendar was the fact that it wasn't an object, it wasn't a component in iCalendar format for these things, and so you had parameters flying all over the place. But adding, that's not a problem with JS Calendar because a lot of these things are rich objects already. So a participant is a rich object. And yes, you can easily add extra properties to that. That is the whole point of the registry that is created at great length at the end of the doc.
So I didn't want to spark a extension version discussion. I'm sorry. I just wanted to provide more structured way to basically describe what you are defining right now. I think that the extension and version and whatever you want to do here will be expressed in that definition in any case. So now there's none. Maybe there will be some indication of a, I don't know, qualified name and maybe even a version of the thing you're revisioning here. Then that is fine. So my initial proposal, coming back to that, was if you're interested in having a data definition language specification that goes along with JCal and JCard, I would be very happy to help you here.
So
excellent, thank you.
I have some questions. When do you think you could provide this, am I saying analysis or formal verification?
No, it's a language definition. So yesterday I by accident saw your draft because I'm looking at the upcoming meeting stuff, and then I was Googling a little bit and I found the JS contact, the JS contact thing. So I can paste, and it took me like 3 hours to create a specific definition, and I can paste the URI in the chat window right now. You go. So this I wrote in the last 2.5 hours, literally. So by reading the draft and creating the data definition, the link is a HackMD. I hope that everybody's fine with that. It's a cloud web 2.0 thingy, and so it shows basically the how I would. This is just the first draft. It doesn't even compile yet. But I think it's rather complete. And this is how I would create, for example, a data definition that highlights how a card group looks like, how they're using cards, what a card is composed of. I segregated the cards into the sections that are defined by the spec. Everything is a group in there, so it's a group of members pushed into the map, and just a JS card, and so on and so on. And at the very bottom of the thing, I create all the string keys for the names I'm creating here, because sometimes I think that related to could be related -2, but you have the definition of camel case, so it's related uppercase 2, and so all these names that are actually going over the via are at the top, the bottom of the document, and at the very top of it, it's a basic structure. As you can see, it's a very big document, and it's taking basically a screen-sized input here that is the whole definition of the thing, leaving out all the labels. That is basically the frosting at the bottom. So I think it's very comprehensive, and yeah, as the name implies, it's concise, and it helps you talk about things. And I had a hard time to read the whole document, and reading through it, basically I was like, okay, when I read all this, I can also write the CDL just side to side, and that's the first input. And again, this took me like 2.5 hours.
So basically, what kind of, I mean, I suspect that when you're going to do that, you may find out some, let's say, inconsistency with the model that is written in the JS calendar draft. Am I correct?
Yeah, you are using different ways to group things. For example, the preferred contact language is an iteration of arrays by definition, and for example, personal info is an iteration of maps by definition. So you could homogenize this. You don't need to, but you can see this basically if you look at this ad hoc. Also, sometimes ordering. Yeah?
What's this written in?
This is written in CDDL. This is a concise definition data language. It's RFC 8610. It was initially created for CBOR, but as CBOR is a superset of JSON, this also is able to map. It's basically streamlined JSON schema. JSON schema unfortunately use JSON for the schema language syntax itself, and therefore it's a little bit crowded. And this is just yeah, basically this is for human between human communication to talk about how the structure looks like. It's for implementers, but in the end you can also use it for creation and validation in the end.
So in any case, I think it's useful.
My question is, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, Robert.
I was just wondering, is that are there other RFCs using that already? Could we have could we have a look at some RFC that is using that?
Yeah, well, the only, from the top of my head, the only RFC that is using this, when it was not an RFC yet, was COSI, the concise object signing and encryption thingy. That's basically the complement to Jose. So COSI uses CDDL notation, but only informational, because at the time of RFC in COSI, CDDL was not the RFC yet. So there are other things in the queue. I don't know, software update for the Internet of Things, concise software identifiers, ZenML. There's a lot of stuff that is using this. Basically, I think today there are about 40 drafts or RFCs that are using CDDL today. More drafts than RFCs apparently, because just was RFC last year. So.
It seems like a good idea to me. The only risk I can see is that if there are inconsistencies between the prose version and the CDDL version in the same document, then that will create errata.
Yeah, I think you typically say which one is the
normative.
Normative, yes.
Yeah.
And you can decide along the way. I'm not pushing this as this has to be the normative language. I just feel I don't have to read the whole document. I just can look at the schema-like structure and can, like in 5 minutes, take it all in and then read the document. That is, for me as a reader, very convenient. And it is not hard to read. You're using the same brackets, like the curly ones for map objects and the edgy ones for arrays, and so on. So you can see all very intuitively, I think, how this is composed, and that helps.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I have to drop out. So, but you have an example. Again, I whipped this up in less than 3 hours, and so I assume that even JCal will have an estimated effort of, like, I assume 2 days and 1 day of I don't know, integrity checks, because as you said, there might be inconsistencies between English prose, and then that's this one here. but by my assumption is it is not that hard.
Cool. It sounds like a good thing to have to me.
Okay, I can put something to the list in a few days.
Yeah, I think that's and do you think you could provide that during May or June?
Yes.
Okay, that would be perfect.
Cool. Okay. Yeah, I will make a kickoff. Sorry, email in a few days. Yeah, so, something like that. And yeah, then we can start some open discussion. But I wanted to give you a heads up. I just wanted to barge in and like, hi, do this. That's like, I don't know, weird.
Yeah, thank Hank. And I'll also pass it on to Mario Lofredo, who is the co-author with me of the JS Contact Draft.
Thanks very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so I'm late already, so see you soon. Bye-bye.
Great, thank you.
Bye.
Bye. All right, do we have any other actions for JS calendar?
Yeah, one thing for me that I wondered, recurrence rules. I understood that they are, at the moment, there are multiple rules per defined, but is that something, again, going to be changed or discussed? That's what I understood from the meeting
It was single.
notes.
It was single and turned to multiple because
Yeah, but looking at the slides for this session, I understood this might be. Sorry, I don't have the slide. Ah, there we are. Need to change recurrence rules and take it back to the list. Is this?
Yeah, that was an action from last time, so that's already been done.
Ah, okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
sorry. Yeah, so I guess we need to make sure that that maps safely back to iCalendar as well, Mike.
it does. I mean, that was the part of the thing is that I know some places where multiple ones are used. So
cool.
And one last thing for me for JS Calendar. Apologies, Mike, I didn't get back to your emails yet. I will answer to the attached example surely today, and I will follow up with the rest.
yeah, I mean, it's just there's so many. I want to try and get them. I'm sort of trying to do the implementation and try and move it along fast and not get bogged down in the implementation details. So at least we can get a first pass through and clear out some of the easy things, at least. I say I don't think this needs to take all that long, and
cool. I'm
well,
also working on the Perl implement.
Not that long, but we have been discussing for an hour.
That's true.
I'm I'd say scales of months. Yes,
we are over time. Thank you for the reminder. We should move on to the next things. If we've got the discussion, will continue on the list. At least we haven't been going as long as EventPub has.
no.
Okay, next on the list was iCalendar series. This is slide number 6.
I guess at this stage, there's not much to say about it. It's pretty much where it was last time. I need to just get another look through it and then shove it out there.
Cool.
So my understanding is that we are waiting for you to update it before reviewing it carefully.
Yeah, I mean, I basically wrote the whole thing in one sitting in a hotel and presented it, and there's been no real substantial objections to it, but I think Neil came up with something at some point. I may have incorporated that. I need to go back through my notes, but
Okay.
I'll bring out another draft, so it's at least, you know, I presume it's expired at the moment. But I don't think it's worth spending time discussing at the moment, especially as we're running late.
Yeah.
Okay.
Subscription upgrade. Last action was Mike to define CalDev details better. A new draft will be discussed in the list.
I can't remember whether I did that. Again, I guess I guess it says we can discuss it on the list. I'll check that and try and I'll go through this in the next few days, and I can push that out. I think we were pretty close to agreement on most of the things, so it's. I'll see if I did that, and if not, I'll do it and then shove it out.
Cool. So slide 9, VAlarm extensions. Ken was going to add geo-proof text.
Yeah, I updated that draft back in, I think, January with some initial text. Don't know if it's going to be sufficient or not, but at least it's a starting point so we can wordsmith something better if need be. And at Robert's request, I also reintroduced the related to property and the snooze rel type for alarms. That was in a previous version of the draft. We removed it, so I think it's fairly non-controversial.
Yep.
I think I recall that it raises some privacy-related discussion. Is that
Yes.
this one? Okay.
Yes.
So I think the main aspect is just not ignoring those privacy issues, but concerns. But there is nothing more we can do about it. I mean, it's. I think it's. I mean, my understanding was that we should more acknowledge that there is a risk, so that people using it or implementing it are really aware, than trying to find out a solution of a very complex problem.
Yes. So I added text to that effect. Again, whether it's sufficient or not, I don't know. It's for the group to decide, and I'll update as necessary.
I guess the question is, do you think it's at the point where we should just do a working group last call on what's there? And if people come up with objections during that time.
That's fine by me. I'm sure the security folks are going to come up with something anyways. So yeah, I'm fine with going to working group last call.
Okay, good.
All right. Daniel, do you want me to take this one as a shepherd?
Oh, I mean, as you wish. I'm going to review it. So if it's ready for last call, I'm going to review it. So.
Okay.
Ken, one question for VAlarms. I might be wrong. I just can't look at the IETF site for whatever reason at the moment. Weren't there in previous versions the definition also for the CalDev properties for default alarms? And as I understand, they are not in the latest draft spec. Are they defined elsewhere? Did I just get it wrong, or were they deliberately dropped?
We removed it because of the difficulty in how a CalDev client notifies a server that it wanted to remove a default alarm. Apple does some wacky stuff by basically post-dating, or I guess predating the alarm. So it uses like 1976 something. It was kind of a hacky way to get around it. And a while ago, the group decided just to take it out, or at least we decided in CalConnect to take it out. The text is still in the XML, so I could put it back in if we deem it necessary. But I don't see an easy way of getting around the issues of how to elegantly remove a default alarm.
Yeah, no, I also think we probably not should add it back. It has this issue with deciding on if events that were created with default alarms that are now updated to some other value should also be changed to include the new default alarm. So I think it's kind of messy anyway.
Yeah, I think my preference would be if we determine that we want to do something with default alarms, just make it a separate draft.
Yeah,
I mean, wasn't the whole problem with default alarms really yet another backward compatibility issue? I mean, it's not, the idea of default alarms is fine, I think. And I think you could implement them quite nicely if you didn't have the iCalendar baggage. So there's two issues. It's one of those things, isn't it? We got two issues here. Is how do we reversibly map an existing iCalendar object and let iCalendar exist in its world of default alarms, and have something in JS Calendar that works, and that we can make sure the two don't screw each other up. Assuming that something that recognizes JS calendar is doing default alarms properly.
Yeah, I took great pains in our implementation for a couple of months, weeks to implement exactly this. So make it work with both what the Apple clients are doing over CalDev at the moment and supporting how it's defined in JS calendar for now.
I think what I'm saying is we probably don't need to reintroduce the default alarm stuff in iCalendar, do we? Because it just doesn't work with old implementations.
No, in iCalendar, I don't think so.
Cool. Last thing we had on this list was vPol.
No, it wasn't.
Was it? No, sorry, this is pasted in from the other version of the agenda. Let's go back to the slides. This is what happened because I messed up the.
Yeah, you got server-side subscriptions after that, at least. Oh, and JS calendar extensions.
Yes.
vPol, I think I made most of the changes. I don't think we've iterated yet. I think the big change to vPol was to use participant instead of the voter property, and it was a lot of changes. I think I've made most of the changes. I need to make another check, and then Ken was going to help me move it along. So I'll endeavor to do that in the near future.
Cool. All right, I've marked that down. All right, now server-side subscriptions. Yes, that was vPol was the last draft that's is accepted into the working
Oh,
group.
okay, all right. That's right. Yeah, I think this seemed. I mean, there are some people who really want this, and it's a great idea, and it was actually promoted by Apple, and then we discovered Apple already have an implementation of server-side subscriptions. But then we've not been able to get back to them to discuss where we go with it and how it matches up to what they already have. But it's I know there are a couple of people at least who would really like to have this, but we haven't gone any further with it.
All right, what's the plan?
I think maybe in the end we should just go ahead and we didn't have a plan. I mean, the plan was to try and communicate with Apple and see how what we had matched up with what they had, and why did they raise it in the first place as if they didn't have it.
Yeah.
And of course, with circumstances, we've not managed to have that discussion.
Yeah.
Maybe we should just go ahead with what we've got, but
it's also possible they raised it before they implemented it. They took our early draft and refined it themselves.
No, well, I mean, from reading the Mozilla document, which was it Mozilla? No, it wasn't. It was one of Everett's documents, I think, is how to interact with these things. I thought the dating predated the. Now it's quite possible that what's his name? Mine's gone blank. The client, Apple client guy, who raised it. It's possible he wasn't even aware that it existed as a service. You know, it was a server-side thing, which is probably buried deep inside the client. He probably never even realized it existed. That seemed to be my thing. It's possible to implement it, but
Well, if we're lucky, maybe they're bored sitting at home as well, and we can.
I think we could contact him.
Yeah.
And,
all right. Well,
maybe that's thing to do.
yeah, always better to match up implementations if we can.
Yeah.
So the story is that you implemented something and you realized Apple got a similar service.
Apple raised it and said they would like to have it was the Apple client guy at, I think it's back in Tokyo, said it'd be great to have server-side subscriptions.
Okay.
Because there are all sorts of things you can do when you have server-side subscriptions, like you can cache stuff, you only need to download it once. Popular things, you could have thousands or millions of subscriptions to the same thing, So it's obviously a good thing. So we said, yeah, that's great. So we came up with a spec, and then sometime later we discovered what the hell is the Everts thing that he was involved with? Anyway, some calendar server implementation. They've got a whole lot of documentation, and part of it said this is how you deal with Apple's server-side subscription. They've got it embedded in CalDAV, as I recollect. So I don't know whether he knew that they had a they actually already had it, but I think we obviously we would like to be aligned. So I guess the thing to do is to ping them and see if we can get an answer as to what's going on there.
And just something, is it related to MQTT or this kind of things, this subscription?
I don't know.
Because
what's that?
MQTT, it's you can subscribe to some feeds.
I don't think so.
No, I don't.
No. Okay,
No,
it looks no.
Just
Okay.
telling the server, here's a page with a link to
Yeah,
it.
it's rather having these things
Copy locally.
like webcal feeds and all the rest of it, or you subscribe to this thing and it's just downloaded maybe by the client or whatever. But when people are all subscribing to the same things, it clearly there's an opportunity to make things work better. And also it does mean that it's in your shared, it's a shared thing. In you know, when you've got multiple devices, you subscribe once,
Okay.
and it turns up in all your clients. So there are many benefits to doing it.
Okay, yeah.
And I think the work we did was basically to define the idea and then define how you do it in CalDAV. And I think we did it through some sort of extended make call approach, I think.
Okay.
Cool. We're down to 5 minutes left, so I think we might just skip over the JS calendar extensions and iSchedule upgrade, which were both kind of speculative future things, and jump straight to the milestone review. So right now we've got milestones for sending the JS calendar draft. Obviously, JS calendar still got a bit of work to do. When do we think we're going to have that ready to submit for real?
I mean, I would, if we can really push on with the mappings, I think a couple of months would cover it.
So say
I mean,
June 2020?
Yeah. Oh, is that what you've got down there?
No,
Oh, yeah.
it's currently
No, you
December
haven't.
2019.
Oh, that's something else. Yeah, okay.
I'm
Yeah.
working from the bottom up.
Oh, yeah, so yeah. Okay.
Via alarm, we've basically said we will submit hopefully next month. So I'll put that as May 2020. Scheduling controls. That was my thing. I have let that lapse. We didn't even talk about it. There we go. I will get back to that. I suspect it's going to be very trivially boring. It's basically just sending scheduling enabled no is the only bit that I think is really worth keeping from that. And that's just adding one header to CalDAV. So I will do that.
One more header.
One more header. Submit vPol document. That's going to be later.
That's going to be later. It's
What do you reckon?
It's
Oh,
probably
you
fall,
guys-
probably fall time.
yeah, I was
I'm
going to say
guessing.
something like October.
Cool.
Let's have a deadline at least.
Yep. Calendar series. It's currently set for June. What do you reckon?
There've been no substantial changes, so it's possible that, I mean, I think I covered the changes. I can go back and check, but it's probably, maybe June's fine.
Cool. And are
Mike,
there any other?
have you implemented that at all?
Partially.
So we have a little bit of experience with it.
Yeah, yeah. And I realized that in the event in my system, I could actually just switch to doing that. For most people would not notice. I could always export it as a recurring event if I needed to. But so yeah, I might try and see whether I can actually get it running live.
Right, subscription upgrade, we don't have anything for at the moment. Do we want to set a milestone on that?
It's always worth having a deadline, isn't it? But it's not urgent. But we could leave that to the fall as well, I guess.
Stick that in October. Cool. And the last thing that we haven't discussed yet, and this was for server-side subscriptions at the moment, that draft is not yet accepted as a working group document. Do we want to?
Sorry, sorry. Can we go back? Can we go back to the previous one?
Yes.
I heard server-side subscriptions, but you were talking subscription upgrade, weren't you?
Yes. Sorry. Yep.
Oh. Yeah, there's almost nothing to do with that. Make it July, so not everything is in June.
Cool.
Sorry, yes, I heard the wrong thing, and server-side subscriptions. I think that's the one where that probably is October, because we need to try and have some contact with Apple and the rest of it.
All right. We need to also formally adopt that as a working group document. So, do you want me to do an action to have a call for adoption on that?
What do you think, Ken? I mean, my recollection is that Apple's current implementation was pretty close to what we came up with without even looking at it.
Yeah, I say if we make a call for adoption, what we have now is a starting point, and if we have to modify it to be compatible, I think we're fine. And maybe it'll help push Apple to respond.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. We don't have to have the draft finalized, and maybe that's going to speed up the commitment of other people to have it adopted. So we should do that maybe right now.
Cool. I'll do it, well, later today, my time, but it's 1:30 midnight now. So I think Neil and I will both be calling it a day at this point. That's the end of our time. Anything else before we sign off?
Nope. Be safe, everyone.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Great. Thanks, everyone.
Nice meeting. Thank you.
See you next time.